The sky over Millfield cracked open at exactly 6 in the morning, and I nearly drove my truck into a ditch because of it. 1 second the sky was gray and ordinary, full of clouds and nothing else. The next second, there was a shape above the tree line, so massive that it blotted out the sun and threw a shadow the size of the whole town across the road. My hands froze on the wheel. My heart slammed against my ribs. Every alarm in my body was screaming the same word. Run. I did not run. I could not. The truck had stalled, and my legs had turned to stone. The shape descended slowly, without a sound, which somehow made it worse. A ship that big should have roared. It should have shaken the ground and cracked windows. Instead, it came down like a whisper, like something that did not need to prove its power, because everyone already knew it had enough. By the time I got my truck started again, my phone was buzzing so hard it nearly fell off the seat. Messages from my sister, messages from my boss. A message from a number I did not recognize, in text so formal it looked like it had been written by a lawyer from another planet. You are requested to report to the Eastern Field immediately. Your presence has been specifically asked for. My name is Daniel Rourke. I fix engines for a living. I am not important. Nobody asks for me by name. Not soldiers, not scientists, not governments, and definitely not whatever had just landed in Old Man Whitfield's cornfield. So when I read that message, I laughed out loud in an empty truck, alone, because it had to be a mistake. It was not a mistake. When I reached the field, there were already soldiers everywhere, human soldiers, standing in loose lines with weapons they did not seem to trust would matter if things went wrong. Beyond them stood a wall of something silver and smooth, curved like the shell of some huge, patient animal. It had no visible seams, no visible weapons, just presence, the kind that pressed on your chest and made you want to apologize for existing. A woman in a dark suit intercepted me before I even got out of my truck. Her badge said government, though I didn't catch which department. Her eyes said she had not slept in 2 days. You are Daniel Rourke, she said, not a question. Yes, I said. Can somebody please explain what is happening? She looked at me like I was both the answer to a problem and the cause of it. They asked for you specifically, she said, by your full name, your childhood address, and something about a promise. The word promise hit me like cold water down the back of my shirt. There is only one promise from my childhood strange enough to matter, and I had spent 20 years convincing myself I had imagined the whole thing. When I was 9 years old, a girl appeared at the edge of our property. Nobody saw where she came from. She wore clothes that did not match any store in town, gray and silver fabric that seemed to shift color depending on the light. She spoke English perfectly, but with a strange formality, like she had learned it from books instead of people. She never laughed at the right moments. She asked questions no other kid asked. Questions like, why do you keep promises you don't have to keep? And what happens to a person who breaks their word? I did not think about any of that at the time. I was 9. I just thought she was interesting, and lonely, and that nobody else wanted to play with her because she was strange, so I did. We spent 1 whole summer together. She told me her name was Vesa, though she said it carefully, like she was testing whether I could be trusted with it. She never told me where she was from. She never told me why she was really there. She watched everything I did with an intensity that made adults uncomfortable, but I never minded it. Near the end of that summer, we sat under the old oak tree behind my house, and she asked me a question that felt like a game at the time. If you had to marry someone, would you marry me? I said sure, why not? The way any 9-year-old would say it, not understanding weight, not understanding meaning, just wanting to keep a friend happy on a warm afternoon. She looked at me with a seriousness that did not belong on a child's face. Then it is decided, she said. I will remember this. 2 days later, she was gone. No goodbye, no explanation. Her family, if she had one nearby, vanished with her. I searched for her for weeks. Eventually I stopped. Eventually I told myself it had been a strange, half-remembered dream, the kind children invent and grow out of. I had grown out of it. Until today. The woman in the suit led me through a corridor of soldiers toward the silver ship. Every step closer made my skin prickle, like walking toward a storm that had not yet decided whether to strike. Then a section of the ship's hull folded open. silent and smooth, and light spilled out onto the dirt. She stepped through it. I knew her instantly, and that terrified me more than the ship ever could. She was not the small, strange girl from my memory anymore. She stood taller than anyone I had ever met, dressed in robes of deep silver that moved like liquid, with markings of light woven into the fabric that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat made visible. Behind her stood figures in dark armor, still and disciplined, clearly guards, clearly dangerous. Around her, an entire crowd of alien dignitaries whispered to each other in languages that sounded like music played backward. But her eyes had not changed at all. They found me across that entire crowd, across all those soldiers and cameras and frightened officials, and they locked onto mine with the same quiet intensity I remembered from a childhood summer. She walked forward. Every alien behind her straightened as she moved, and every human around me went rigid with fear, unsure whether to bow, run, or reach for a weapon. She stopped directly in front of me, close enough that I could hear the murmurs die into total silence. "Hello, Daniel," she said. My mouth had gone completely dry. "Hi," I managed. "Long time." A flicker crossed her face, something almost like amusement, quickly hidden beneath formality. 22 years, 4 months, and 6 days, she said. I have not forgotten a single one of them. Someone behind me made a strangled noise, like they were trying not to faint. "I have come to fulfill the promise you made me," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the field, loud enough that every camera and every soldier and every dignitary heard it. "You agreed to marry me. That agreement was made freely, without threat, without benefit to either of us beyond friendship. On my world, such a promise, once made, is unbreakable. I have returned to honor it, and to see whether you would honor it as well." For one long moment, nobody breathed. Then chaos exploded around us, though none of it touched the small space between her and me. Officials began shouting into radios. Cameras flashed. Somebody important-looking pushed through the crowd demanding to know what alliance this represented, what treaty this would form, what humanity stood to gain or lose. Vesa did not even glance at them. Her attention stayed locked on me, patient, waiting. I looked past her shoulder at the alien dignitaries watching this unfold, some curious, some clearly disturbed, that their princess had crossed half the galaxy for a promise made by a 9-year-old on a dirt farm. I understood, in that instant, that this was not just about me. Whatever happened next in this field would decide how an entire empire saw humanity. So I did the only thing that felt honest. I stopped worrying about cameras and soldiers and empires, and I spoke to her the way I would have spoken to the girl under the oak tree. "You could have called first," I said. "Would have saved me a heart attack." The silence that followed was different this time. Somewhere behind her, one of the armored guards shifted, as if unsure whether that was an insult worthy of response. Vesa's lips curved, just slightly, into the ghost of a real smile. "I do not know your number," she said. "I only knew a promise, and a place, and a boy who kept his word even when he did not understand its weight." "I am not a boy anymore," I said. "No," she said, "you are not. And I am no longer simply a lost child wandering a human field. Much has changed, but the promise has not." One of the human officials, sweating badly, leaned toward me and hissed that I needed to be careful, that this could start something enormous, that every word I said next mattered more than anything I had ever said in my life. I heard him. I understood him. And for the first time since the ship had landed, I felt calm instead of afraid. "Can I ask you something?" I said to Vesa. "Always," she said. "Why me? Out of everyone in your empire, everyone with power, everyone with status, why did you come back for a farm kid who fixes tractors for a living?" She studied me for a long moment, and when she answered, her voice had lost its formal edge, replaced by something quieter and far more honest. "Because you did not know what I was," she said. "You did not know I was hiding from danger on my own world. You did not know I carried a title that would have made most of your species either fear me or try to use me. You simply saw a strange, lonely child, and you were kind to her anyway, expecting nothing in return." She glanced briefly at the guards behind her, then back to me. "Every species I have encountered since that summer has taught me the same lesson, again and again. Power invites flattery. Flattery breeds lies. I have been surrounded my entire life by beings who tell me what they think I want to hear, because they fear what I could do to them if they do not. You never did that. You told me the truth, even when it was small, even when it did not matter. You promised me something with nothing to gain, and you meant it. In my empire, that quality is rarer than any weapon, rarer than any treasure. One of the dignitaries behind her, an older alien wrapped in ceremonial cloth, spoke up in a translated voice that crackled slightly through some hidden device. Princess, forgive the interruption, but the Council will require more than childhood sentiment to accept this action. Humanity is young, unstable, unproven. Vesa did not turn to face him. She kept her eyes on me. Then let them watch, she said. Let the Council see what unstable, unproven humanity does when offered power, when offered fear, when offered every reason to lie for advantage. She looked at me expectantly, and I understood, with a jolt of nervous energy, that this was a test happening in front of an entire empire, broadcast probably to more worlds than I could imagine, and I was the one being tested. I could have played along. I could have bowed, played the part of the grateful farm boy chosen by royalty, said whatever sounded impressive enough to please a crowd of alien dignitaries. Part of me, the part that understood the stakes, screamed that I should. Instead, I crossed my arms and looked at her the way I used to look at her under that oak tree, unimpressed by titles, unbothered by fleets. If I say yes right now, I said, everyone watching is going to think I'm doing it because of that ship behind you, or because of that crown, or because saying no to an empire seems like a bad idea for my health. A murmur rippled through the alien crowd. Somewhere behind me, I heard the woman in the suit whisper a quiet, panicked, "Oh no." Vesa's eyes narrowed slightly, not with anger, but with focus, the way she used to look at me when I said something she had not expected. "Then what would you have me believe instead?" she asked. "I would have you wait," I said. "Not forever, just long enough for this to be my choice, not a headline. I made you a promise as a kid without understanding what it meant. If I say yes now, I want it to be because of the person standing in front of me, not because a fleet is parked in a cornfield, and everyone here is terrified of what happens if I say the wrong thing." For a long moment, nobody moved. The old dignitary behind her looked like he might collapse from shock. One of the armored guards actually took half a step forward, as if my words had been some kind of threat, before Vesa raised a single hand, and he stopped instantly. Then, slowly, she smiled. A real smile this time, wide and unguarded, the same smile I remembered from a summer 22 years gone. "There it is," she said quietly, almost to herself. "That is exactly why I came back." She turned to the crowd of dignitaries, guards, and stunned human officials, and her voice rose again, carrying across the entire field. "You wish to know what makes this species worth our attention," she said. "You have your answer. A human farmer, faced with an empire's power and an empire's fear, refused to bend simply because bending was easier. He asked for honesty instead of comfort. He chose truth over advantage, even when the entire weight of my authority stood in front of him. Tell me, honestly, how many worlds under our banner would produce such a response?" Nobody answered her. Nobody needed to. She turned back to me, and the crowd noise faded into background static as her eyes met mine again. "I will wait," she said, "as long as it takes for this to be your choice, and not merely your fear. But know this. Wherever I go next, whatever worlds I visit, whatever thrones I inherit, the promise remains open. I do not withdraw my word simply because yours requires patience." I nodded, throat tight, unsure what to say that would not sound small compared to everything happening around us. "Fair enough," I said. "But if you're going to keep showing up in cornfields with a battle fleet, you might want to warn a guy first. Some of us still need our hearts for later." That earned an actual laugh from her, short and surprised, the kind of sound that seemed to catch even her own guards off guard. Somewhere in the crowd, one of the human soldiers exhaled like he had been holding his breath since the ship first appeared. The negotiations that followed took days, weeks, months, involving people far more important than a farm mechanic from Millfield. Diplomats argued over treaties, resources, boundaries, and the strange new attention an empire once uninterested in humanity now paid to our entire species, all because of one afternoon in a cornfield and one stubborn refusal to be intimidated. But that part of the story belongs to other people. People whose job it is to sit in rooms and argue about the future of worlds. My part of the story is smaller and stranger, and somehow means more to me than anything happening in those meeting rooms. Every few weeks, a small, quiet ship lands near Millfield, without fanfare, without soldiers lining the field, without cameras waiting to capture the moment. Vesa steps out alone, dressed simply, nothing like the robes and crowns from that first, chaotic day. We walk the same fields we walked as children. We sit under the same oak tree, older now, its branches heavier, its roots deeper. She still asks strange questions, the kind no one else thinks to ask. I still answer honestly, because that has always been the only thing I know how to offer her. An empire watches humanity differently now, not because of fleets or treaties, but because a 9-year-old girl once decided that a promise, freely given by a stranger with nothing to gain, was worth crossing the galaxy to honor. And me, an ordinary man who fixes engines for a living, I get to sit under an old tree with someone who could have chosen anyone in the universe, and remember that sometimes the biggest moments in history begin with the smallest, simplest words. I will marry you someday, I told her, sitting under that same oak tree, years after the ship first darkened our sky. She looked at me the way she always had, patient, certain, unshaken by empires or titles or fear. I know, she said. I have known since the day you promised. I was simply waiting for you to catch up.